zoom this here. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Trish Rutgers. I am a board member with the Duxbury Parent Connection, and we're excited to have you here today for our second of the series that we did, one Lunch and Learn series last week on quarantining with the middle school child's brain and mind. And today we're going to be hearing from Judi Johnson, who is going to focus on the elementary child's brain and mind. So we're very excited to have her today, and she is a educator, teacher, and also an executive functioning coach with Effective Effort Consulting. And today's presentation is going to be more engaging and collaborative. So raise your hand, ask questions through the chat, or unmute your microphone. And I think that it's going to be great. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say, Judi, and really appreciate your time and being here. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Trish. I appreciate that. I wanted to start out with how I started out when I was first starting parenting. So I don't know if you were like me, but started out, I was going to be the perfect parent. I read all these books and I was going to get my kids to just get right on board with the project. They were going to have these pristine rooms, and they were going to have these perfect manners, and they were going to have all these beautiful traits. They would pack like they were going to Europe in a second. They were just going to be so on par. Homework was going to be pristine and perfect, straight A students. I had all these dreams, and I did the research to get there, and I started on my way, and I started creating these like little perfect beings. And then one day I realized, as my son had a friend over, and the friend dumped a bucket of toys all over the place, and he screamed because all he knew was he was going to have to clean it up. And I said, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing to these kids? He doesn't even want to like really get into play. He doesn't want to get his hands dirty and get in there because he's too worried about the consequences. So I started really thinking, and I wanted to switch directions. And I said to myself, okay, so let me start focusing on taking a bit of the stress out of that. Let's move that bucket over to the side. And instead of creating these perfect kids, maybe let's create a little bit of a balance. So I started thinking about even just food. Like, instead of being a member of the Clean Plate Club, which, you know, you have to clean up that plate in order to leave the table, that didn't feel good. But then I also didn't want to go over to the other side of the fence where, you know, you're short order cook and you're making all these different meals. That didn't feel good either. And then I started looking at different aspects of, like, you know, the children should not be seen, not heard generation, or the other aspect of, you know, you're the chauffeur and you're driving around your kids, you have no life yourself because your life is completely your kids. And that felt out of balance. So I tried to swing that pendulum to the middle. And instead I started thinking, you know what, I really want my kids to learn what they need in order to be happy, and what they need to establish good decision-making, self-regulation, and emotional regulation skills. And I started trying to do research in that venue. And I started trying to really think about what matters in life, so that at the end of things, these children could be happy, productive, well-adjusted individuals. And it wasn't because I told them what to do, but they figured it out themselves. I wanted them to experience life a little bit through trial and error. So have the freedom to understand that it's okay to make a mistake. Have the freedom to get out there and try things. And if they make a mistake, to decide, you know what, that's okay. I can learn from it. What's the learning here? And if it's a big mistake, maybe even make amends or make it right. So I decided to change the focus of my parenting. And along with that, I changed the focus of my coaching. So I work with students who have executive function challenges. A lot of kids have ADHD, and I help them navigate their lives through their eyes. And I feel like my role is to help them figure out what works for them. So I don't walk in and say, okay, you have a test on Friday, you need to start studying, you need to get out this textbook and do this. I start asking them what they think they need to do and how they can go through the process so that they feel good about themselves at the end of the week, at the end of the day. So today, I wanted to try something a little different. I don't have a big PowerPoint presentation scheduled. I have a few slides that I wanted to share with you because those are like the meat of the topic. And I wanted you to be able to have a visual of that. And so it might be a little clunky. I'm going to try. I've never been the Zoom host before. So I'm going to try to quickly navigate over. So please have some patience if it gets a little funny. But I'm going to encourage you to ask questions. I'm going to encourage you to make comments. You can use the chat function. You can actually unmute yourself and ask questions right in here. Because I'm at heart, I'm a teacher. I'm a 4th grade teacher by trade. And it makes me feel good to have understanding of like whether or not my audience understands me. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just kind of yammering on and who knows. And also, I want this to be really meaningful. And I want to be able to look at you because one of the things we're going to be talking about is connection. And I felt like if I was staring at myself or a screen, I wouldn't be able to connect with you. So I wanted to be able to connect with you as we talk about connection. So the first thing we're going to talk about is emotional. Actually, I'm going to tell you all the things. Let me let you know what we're happening. So we're going to talk about emotional regulation through a process called integration, connect, and redirect. We're going to talk about planning, so teaching your students or your kiddos to plan through intrinsic motivation. Then we're going to go into sound decision making so that and problem solving so that your students can figure out how to make those decisions and regulate themselves. How to get good cooperation because we know kids can be really tricky and might have their own agenda. And then some tips throughout the summer to help you navigate the summer, because this summer is going to be a little different this year. And so, that will help you. So I just kind of tried to have my best tips, that my favorite things that I found really, really help. Because I work with a number of parents. I kind of do this every day on an everyday basis. But this is the first time I'm really driving the agenda. Usually parents come to me with a problem and then I help them work through it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is emotional regulation. Now, emotional regulation is when you try to not control your emotions, but you try to regulate them you feel them, but you don't get overwhelmed by them, if that makes sense. You want to feel your emotions, but not get overwhelmed by them. Now, who's been here? Your kiddo sits down in front of math and there's a word problem. And the first thing they say is, nope, I can't do it. And you look and you're like, hey, you didn't even give it a try. You just already said you didn't know how to do it without even looking at the problem. And you say, and he goes, no, I really can't do it. It's too hard. And then you say, you know what? Let's just sit down, just try a little bit. And I'm sure, all you have to do is subtract these two numbers, you'll be fine. And your kiddo looks at you and he goes, you don't understand. You're not even there. My teacher teaches it totally different and you don't get it. I think every household in America has gone through this in some sort of situation. I know I have. And I used to try coming in with my logic and trying to fix that problem. But then through some research, I realized that it's actually the equivalent of, let's give another scenario. It's you and your spouse. You walk in and you say to your spouse, I had a really hard day. And your spouse says, you were just there for a couple hours. It couldn't have been that hard. And you say, no, my boss gave me this really hard project and I'm not even sure where to start. And your husband or your spouse says, you didn't even try. You just got it today. Just start and you'll be fine. and you say, oh, you just don't understand. You don't work there. How can you give me any solutions? I want you to think for this moment, in that if your spouse came in, instead of giving you that, maybe you like that litany, but maybe you'd like something different. Does anybody have, either you can chat, go through the chat, or and participate. What would you like your spouse to say at that moment? At the beginning moment, when you walk in and you say, I had a really hard day. Any brave souls who wanna give some who wanna try?
I will. I'm so sorry that happened. I've been there. I know it really stinks when you have a day like that.
Awesome.
I've heard you and I get it.
That's right. Good job, Tara. Thank you. That's great. Oh, I have tell me about it. What happened? That sounds terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. You guys are experts. This is great. I'm sorry you had a hard day. I can understand. If there's any way I could be of help, I'd be happy to. That one's a winner. I know that's the one I would like. I'm sorry you had a hard day. All of those are actually excellent. You guys are really good at this. It's all about really coming in and empathizing. If you want to offer some help, that's even better. But just being there and listening to, you want to be heard, you want to be listened to. And it's so easy to really get that when it's about you, but it's so hard to do it when you see it from somebody else. And that doesn't mean it's because you're a bad person or anyone's a bad person. It's because we are feelers. We care so much about our children or our spouses that we want to help fix it. So we come in and we just want to help and fix. But that's actually not how the brain works. So what's happening, and I'm going to actually go over and do a little slideshow. So wait, I have to screen share. And okay, so can you see what I see?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson wrote this amazing book. I'm going to hold it up, The Whole Brain Child. This is like practically my Bible. In there, it teaches you how the brain works. And so by understanding how the brain works, you can start to begin to work with your children. Now, most people know that there's a left brain and a right brain. So, and sometimes you forget which side is which. So the way I remember left brain, it's logical, linear, linguistic, and literal. So the 4 L's. So left brain, logic. Now on the right side of the brain, you're able to do things like sense emotions and information from the body. What does that mean? So if you have a tummy ache or you're like butterflies in your tummy, you start to understand that you're nervous. If you have a tightness in your chest, you might be feeling stress or maybe some headache. So that's sensing emotions from and information from the body. It's nonlinear. It jumps around. It might tell a story completely out of order. It's nonverbal, which means it reads cues like tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, things like that. And it can put things into context and see the whole picture. So that means you can see the whole pictures. Left side, you're going to see the details, and right brain, you're going to see the whole picture. So when we are in that scenario with our kiddo and the math word problem, what's happening is this kiddo is over here in his right side of his brain. He's completely emotionally flooded. He's not thinking logically, linear, linguistic, or literal. He's sensing his emotions from his body. He's feeling this pain in his belly as he kind of sinks into the chair, kind of pushing away from the problem. He's not thinking logically. He's actually thinking emotionally. So when we go in with our logic brain, it's not, I always say, like, imagine like it has logic proof glass right in front of you. So no logic is getting in at this moment. What you want to do is connect your right brain to his right brain. And so what does that look like? It might be softening your tone of voice, saying something like, oh man, word problems can be really hard sometimes. Or you could say something like, yeah, sometimes I get frustrated too. Or just a compassionate look. You know, you can soften your eyes, maybe rub his back, and just give him a moment. So those are all your nonverbal communications, because he can't hear the logic yet. It's the yet part. So what we want to do is help him integrate. We want his right brain to cross over the corpus callosum and start talking to his left brain. So I do this a lot. Right brain talks to the left brain, and now we have integration. So once you can actually, once he feels like his feelings have been felt, then he can cross over, and then you can start talking about logical situations. Okay, so once he feels like you understand where he's coming from, he can hear like, what if we read this together? Or, you know what? This one's tricky. Let me know if you need help. Or, why don't we take a little break and come back to it? This one seems a little tricky. Let's get a drink of water. Something, and that's actually moving, and that will help too. So here we have, so that was your example. Here we have a step-by-step. The first thing we're gonna do is connect right brain to right brain using tone of voice, posture, facial expressions, and eye contact. We're gonna wait for integration. I call this mic drop. So imagine you're talking to your kid. What we end up doing is we're like, we start talking all over. You have to do this, and then it's information overload. So what I would do is keep it sweet and short. Man, that looks really hard. Mic drop. End of conversation, so that they can actually have time to integrate. Watch for those body signals. So what we're going to do is watch. So if your kid's kind of like in this position, trying to move physically away from this word problem, you're going to watch for him looking at you. And I call this, you get me eyes. Kind of like give you those puppy dog eyes, like you understand me. It's the most beautiful thing, actually. You can start to see the posture where the shoulders were up here. It starts to relax. And so you can see the relaxation, the breathing might be calmer. These are all those body signals that show you he's ready to integrate. And it might not be on your timeline. That's the tricky part. You might want to get that word problem over in a couple minutes. He might not be ready to integrate for 10 minutes, half an hour. It might take a little time. The more you practice though, the quicker the integration. And then you get to redirect with your left brain. So that means you can start planning your solutions. You can use your words. You can like talk to them more. You're going to talk about logical explanations. And if this is some sort of situation, not like a word problem, but actually it even could be a word problem, you can set some boundaries. So maybe he used some language that was not so friendly, was not so polite. That's the time that you can talk about boundaries. You know what? You really hurt my feelings when you called me that name, or when you said I was stupid, or whatever it is. That's when you set your boundaries. If you start in when he's in his right brain all upset, and you start giving the reprimands, that's only going to ignite the fire. You want to wait for integration, and once there's integration, you can set your boundaries. Okay, so I thought we could do some examples, because this is one of those things where it is really easy to understand, and it's really hard to implement in the moment. So I'm gonna have you practice this. First of all, we have to get into the right frame of tone, like the right tone. So when we do this, you don't want to be like, well, math problems are really hard. You actually have to get that like tone, like, wow, math problems are really hard. Like get in there so that he knows that he understands you. Or she, if you have a daughter. So the first example we're going to do is we're going to talk about, okay, if your child comes in and says to you, I just got off the bus and the bus driver yelled at me and everyone laughed. I want you, and this kid's upset. I want you to think about what you could say to your child at that moment so that you are first connecting right brain to right brain. You can write it down. I see a bunch of you writing. You can put it in the chat so we can see some examples, or if anybody wants to volunteer, I'd love to hear it. Because this is a really good time to practice those nonverbal communication skills, those soft voices, soft eyes. Oh, I'm so sorry you were embarrassed. Yeah. Some of us want to go, well, you must have been doing something to get yelled at. That would be the left brain, or maybe even the downstairs brain. That must have been difficult for you. Oh, getting yelled at feels horrible, doesn't it? Oh no, that makes me sad. I'm sure it made you upset too. Do you want to talk about it? Good. That must have been really upsetting. You guys are good at this. Awesome. Okay, so we're going right into that right brain communication. Now you're going to wait for those nonverbals. You're going to wait for him to relax and show you that he's ready to talk. He might not be ready to talk for an hour or a couple of hours, or maybe he needs to go watch a TV show or something before he can integrate. But then it's time to talk about your logic, your solutions, your problems. That's when you can start saying, I wonder what made the bus driver yell at you. So now we're not saying you're wrong. You're not saying he's wrong. The bus driver's wrong. You're not saying the kid's wrong. You're starting to gather some empathy, some perspective taking. I wonder what would have made that bus driver yell at you. So now from a non-defensive place, your child can start to see their point of view. A lot of people want to jump in and figure out what happened right away. Or sometimes some parents are really afraid to even look at this example because they're thinking, well, my kid does do stuff. So if I start, empathizing with them, he's going to think he's right. But this whole exercise isn't about telling your kiddo that he's right or wrong. It's just telling your kiddo that you understand where he's from and what he's doing and where he's coming from. It's the ultimate in perspective taking. And when you can really perspective take with your kiddo, that's when you're able to get someplace. That's when you're able to get in there and get some work done. All right, let's do one more example because you did really well. We don't have to do too many of them. If your child comes home and she says something like, school is stupid, I don't want to go anymore. I want you to think about how you can address that scenario. Come in with your nonverbals, something short and sweet, no problem solving. You're just going to try to figure out what your child's feeling. Good. Sounds like you had a really hard day. That's it. Nice. That must have been upsetting. Oh, honey, I felt that way before. It's a tough spot to be in. Good. You've been there too. That's empathy. Absolutely. Wow, honey, it sounds like you're really upset about something. Good. These are all great. You guys are awesome at this. Okay. You can keep going but I'm going to kind of keep going on. So, and again, you're going in, you're empathizing where they are. You're not telling them, because I would been like, whoa, what happened? I want to know right away what happened, but he's not there yet. He just wants you to understand how he feels, or she. I keep saying he, but this obviously goes back and forth between boys and girls, so I apologize about that.
Judi, I'm sorry to interrupt. So it's best to wait then and be patient instead of pry? That's hard.
I know it's so hard. I personally want to jump right in. What do you mean? What happened? Why don't you want to go? Especially, no, that was a great point, Trish. Especially, let's say you're like ready to go out the door in the morning, right? Now, I know we're all in quarantine. Things are a little different, but that's why I like teaching this. I mean, I love this all the time, but when we teach this at a time where we're in quarantine, so we have time to work on these skills. We have time to help your child integrate at this time. And some people want to give me that driver's number. That would be firing from the downstairs brain. we'll get into that at another time. But totally understand. So let's say you could even be trying to get out the door, and all of a sudden your kiddo balks, and they're like, nope, I don't want to go. And what we want to do is shove them out the door. And sometimes, guess what? We have to do that because you do have to get to school on time. Or maybe it's a time that you don't have to get to school on time. Maybe it's a time that you can work out, wow, something's really bothering you. And that's when they don't have to fight you. All children want to do is be understood. And so if you work hard to understand them, they won't work so hard to be heard. And sometimes if they're not heard, they get louder. And then they get louder and they start screaming. And if you still don't hear them, they start throwing things. They might start using profanity, kicking walls. Those are all body language signals that they need to be heard. And that's what's really hard, because I don't know about you, but if I see that behavior, I get fired off. And I'm like, whoa, that's not appropriate. Absolutely not. And so this is one of the hardest things you can do, is actually try not to fire off, but try to stay in that he's telling me, she's telling me something that through her behavior that she does not have the words for. Because what we want to say is use your words, use your words, use your words. Guess what? She might not be able to use her words at that point because her brain is firing off from a different place. If she's kicking things and punching things, this is a whole other topic, but she's firing from her downstairs brain. And that means she's not able to access language, except for maybe profanity. And when we use profanity, that's literally, I cannot access words. I just need to be understood. So, Lee, looks like you've seen some big things through solutions. Awesome, Lee. That's great. So does that make sense? I don't want to move on too quickly because I know this is like it's like a very big shift in the way we were maybe brought up, the way generations have, nobody's ever done this before. This is what I would call progressive parenting. This is like parenting before your time. But I have noticed, I mean, I work with these kids. I would do a lot of parent coaching and help parents through this process. And the parents who really work with this, and they really try hard, and they give themselves patience and their kiddos patience. They're the parents whose kids see the biggest difference. And I've seen kids who are tantruming and throwing things and cursing to moving to happier, more peaceful, calm places. And it's because what you're doing by accepting their feelings, waiting, and then moving over to logic is you're helping them integrate their brains. Their right brain is able to talk to their left brain. We don't always inherently do this. This is a developmental skill. So your little kids are going to have a harder time with this than your older kids. But the more you work at this, the easier it's going to be for them to integrate their brains on their own. You're like laying down the foundation so that they're able to integrate. So does that make sense? Is everybody good with this one? Okay, good. And you can think about this. I want you to start just thinking about how you typically react to your kiddo. Do you typically react with left brain solutions, focusing on strategies and things like that without accepting feelings? Do you go right into fix-it mode? I know that's me. I had to really, really work hard. This was not natural for me. I've worked over years and years and years to try to figure this out and taken classes and all that. So I know I'm a left brain parent for sure, or there's the right brain parent who might also get emotionally flooded themselves. If their kiddo's having that hard time with that word problem, then all of a sudden they're having a hard time even keeping their emotions in check. Or you can be overly empathetic with your child, and then you kind of don't get anywhere because you're like, oh, I know school's so hard, let's just go to the playground. And so you never actually get to the school work. So that, and you don't have to fess up, but I just want you to kind of think about it internally. Which side of the fence that do you roll on? Are you majority a lefty, logic strategies, or righty emotional kind of person? And if you start understanding that piece, when it happens, you're going to be able to recognize yourself first, and then you're able to address your students' needs. So next we're going to talk about, oh, we're a fixer. I love it. And then, I'm glad you brought that up, Jen. So you're a fixer and you're trying to work on your right side. So you know what, I'm glad you put it that way, because someone at one point mentioned that they are a left brain logic person when they're in public and their child is acting up, and they're a right brain emotional person at home when they're home by themselves. So their brains definitely switch like in between what venue they're at. And so I thought that, so you can do both, and it has to, maybe it's the different topic or something like that. So let's look on to planning intrinsic motivation. So we've been in quarantine for quite some time, and I don't know how your school does it, but in my school, we have to do, my kids have this thing where they get assigned work on Monday, and then everything is due on Friday. And so, and a lot of the students that I work with have the same thing going on. And when I first started working with them, there's a lot of kids who came in and they would have these really huge stressful Fridays. They would leave a lot of their work till Friday, and then every Friday was this like emotional like frenzy of like, and now it's mom and dad's job to help their student try to figure out and navigate this whole world. And that of course does not feel good. And then, sometimes elementary school has a daily assignments. Okay. So I'd like to talk about this because it's interesting how you can do this actual process will be helpful for anything, any projects, because sometimes teachers really break things down, and then that's a lot easier for your kids to navigate. And then sometimes it's important for them to figure out their planning skills on their own. So I worked with this, a lot of different methods, but I wanted to share one that was kind of out of the box that I've used with a few students who really understand. So the first thing you want to do is kind of tell your kids what to do. I don't want a stressful Wednesday. I don't want a stressful Friday, because you know what, mom and dad's got work, we're busy, and you got to get your stuff done. So you want to plan it for them. And that's like that, like planner, fixer, doer. But what you're doing is you're planning for your kiddos. If your true intention is for them to figure out self-regulation, you want to start with intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is really interesting because what you want to do, everybody cares about how they feel. Now, what a lot of students, especially those with executive function challenges, can understand how they feel now, and right now they don't feel like doing work. But what they don't understand is their future self. So what will I look like on Friday? Well, they don't either care or they cannot really tap into that future person. You as an adult have a lot of experience tapping into that future person. You can connect those dots of my actions now and how they will affect me later. But your student has not developed those skills yet. So what I have kids do is I start to have them visualize, okay, what do you want Friday to look like? Visualize yourself on Friday. Sometimes we even go like and look at the weather. And we go, oh, like let's say like Wednesday looks like a really nice sunny day. I wonder what you're going to want to be doing on Wednesday. Tuesday looks like it's going to rain. What could Tuesday be good for? And you just start to like think about the weather and how you might not want to navigate, especially where, you know, we're inside all the time. And like being outside is even more important than usual. So, so I have usually kids think about, all right, so what do you picture yourself on Friday? What do you want to look like on Friday? How do you want to feel on Friday? And we talk about a lot about feelings, but my students actually really like it because they've never really thought about it before. We take the word should out of the vocabulary. You should do your work. And we replace it with, how do you want to feel on Friday? And the kids all say the same thing. Oh, well, I don't want to feel stressed at all. I want to feel good. I want to feel like I've got it under control and I want only just a little bit of work to do. And of course I say, great, let's make that happen. Now for some kids, we write it like a little list. You can fill out an agenda. I'll often do it on an Excel spreadsheet kind of a thing. But for your elementary school kiddos, you want to probably make it more concrete. So I worked this little method out with some of my parent coaching, and I'm going to show you how it looks. Okay, so here we have all the assignments for the week. And if you notice, there's the label on top, and then what we did was we put a number underneath, trying to decide about how long we thought it would take. So looking at these, and you know, some people would say, all right, there's 15 assignments and there's 5 days of the week. Let's do 3 assignments a day. And that's an easy method, but not all assignments are weighted equally. And not all kiddos are gonna be willing to do that 45-minute, 3-paragraph essay on Friday. So what we try to do is really figure out what each of these are weighted. And I like to put them about how long we think they're going to take. Now, I have another piece of paper, and I'll show you this one. It's just the days of the week with empty slots. And what we start to do, and if I want a kiddo to really understand how to plan, I say, okay, well, let's start popping in your assignments. And they might say, all right, well, let me do 1 math assignment a day. It's about 20 minutes, and this is about, all right, 15, and they start putting in all the assignments. And then they might say, all right, writing's really hard for me. So do you want to save that on Friday, or do you think you might be a little stressed out on Friday and put it earlier? And that's when they're like, oh, yeah, I should do that earlier. I'm going to do that Tuesday. And you just put in your assignments so that they can see it really, really clearly. And for those kids who really even need more of an understanding of time management, I have at the bottom a little spot for how many minutes total this is going to take. So if you've added, let's say if you had taken the time and put all your assignments in and then added them up at the bottom, you could see how many minutes about this should take. So now you have your sheet out, and let's just say your kiddo didn't want to do an assignment. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, so where would you put that? And then you'd have to move it on over. But if you already have a bunch of assignments here, and it starts to really get filled up, and you start saying, wow, what do you think that day is going to feel like if it's a 220-minute day? And that's when you can help, using intrinsic motivation, help them move those assignments over to the beginning of the week. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And then a lot of people, a lot of kiddos will have a hard time starting. And when they have a hard time starting, that's called task initiation. And the way I'll work with kiddos that way is that I'll start telling them, okay, so let's say it's a writing assignment. That's typically pretty hard for kids. They often feel almost like a victim of their circumstances. Oh, this is being done to me. Like, I hate writing. And all they do is they kind of dwell. They're over here in the right side of their brain. So if they're not too emotionally flooded, of course, if they're really emotionally flooded, you need to connect. But if they're not too emotionally flooded, you can ask them a question like, if doing quality work, how long do you want this assignment to take? And they look at you like, what? Like they have no idea that they have the power to actually power through this, because they usually dwell so much over here in their emotional brain that they don't even realize it. So if you ask them, how long do you want it to take? And doing quality work, they'll say, oh, well, I want it to take 45 minutes. Okay, great. Why don't we set the timer for halfway? And let's see, if we set the timer for halfway, what would be the halfway point of this assignment? Oh, well, if it's 3 paragraphs, it would be 1.5 paragraphs. Great, let's get started. So as you go ahead and help your kids initiate, that's the one that I found helps them become empowered. I used to have a little girl who I worked with all the time, and she would just hem and haw, and she'd hate to do her homework, and she'd just get all up in her emotional brain or even in her reactive brain. And by asking her these questions, all of a sudden she's like, oh, no, I want to get this done now. And then you'd say, okay. And she'd get to work. It was the most amazing little trick I ever did see. So I just wanted to share that with you. Let me see. These ideas are not, oh, that's sweet. Thank you, Lee. Okay, so now I just want to give you a couple of other ways of using intrinsic questions without going into a ton of detail. If you have a kiddo who has a test on Friday, think about asking them, how do you want to feel during that test? They all say the same thing. I want to feel like I know what I'm doing. I want to feel good about myself. And then once they determine how they want to feel, and these are kids who have a really hard time making themselves study. But if you actually ask them to how they want to feel during a test, then you can back it up and say, if you want to feel confident on Friday, what do you need to do in order to make that happen? And that's when the kids can move and make their plan for the week. You can do the same thing about a project. How do you want to feel when you hand in this project? I'm going to feel like I did a really good job. They all say the same thing. Okay, great. So how are you going to do that? And they go, well, and they'll say, or how do you usually feel? Like, oh, it's usually really stressful. I really don't like doing these projects. It's a lot of stress. Well, how can we make you feel not stressful? And then all of a sudden you have kids finishing projects days in advance because they are anticipating if they wait to the last minute, they will feel stressful. And so now you're turning around the object. That's all about intrinsic motivation. I now understand I want to feel good about my work and I don't want to feel stressed. If you're thinking about a report card, how can you feel, how do you want to feel when you open up your report card? If you have a kiddo who doesn't want to study or doesn't want to do makeup work or doesn't want to do anything. Oh, well, I want to feel good when I open up my report card. And so now you're not telling them what to do, but you're having them figure out what they want to do in order to feel good when they open up their report card. I have a couple questions over here. Let me see. My first grader tries to finish his assignments as quickly as possible and also tries to negotiate which ones he can skip. I fear he's not getting much from the online work. That is tricky, especially nowadays with this online work business. I absolutely understand. So okay, so if it's doing, I always use the word quality work. So if we're talking about quality work, then what you want to do, let's say he finishes it and then hands it and he's like, all right, I'm done. So when I go for quality work, the first thing we want to do is look at this and be like, oh, look at this handwriting. My God, I can't even read anything. So number one, you just kind of knocked them down a notch. And then you kind of go, oh, number 2 is wrong and number 5 is wrong. Trust me, I've done this. So the first thing you do is look for what's wrong. But what happens is then kids don't want to come to you and bring you their work. So what you want to do is switch it around and I like to try to find at least 3 positive things that I'm going to say about this paper. Go, oh, look at that. You've got, oh my gosh, I think these 4 are totally right. That looks good. Over here, I like the way you answered that question. And I like that your J in the way you wrote that name. Let's say the whole page is awful about handwriting, but you found the one good word. Notice those good things. Then you can go back and say, you know what, I think you have to look at a couple of these. Let's take a look and, maybe we have to redo these couple of problems, and then you can be done. So if it's a do this, then that. So this first is do quality work, and then that is go out and play, have some video game time, that kind of a thing. I hope that makes sense. Negotiating, that's boundaries. You have to decide that whether you're, if you're the mom or you're the dad, and you're saying, well, this is what is needed to do in order for you to go X, Y, and Z. So in my house, what we do is, work happens in the morning, and when work is done, then we go do something fun. And so it's do this first and then that. So that really helps. And you're putting it on your student, because you're saying, yeah, I totally want to go out and have fun. Let's go take a walk. Let's go to the beach. Let's do whatever. But these kinds of things have to happen first. So that would be how I'd word that one. I hope that helps. Danielle, let's see. Summer's going to be tricky with lack of camps and activities. Can we do something similar to structure our summer? Absolutely. I was just having a conversation with some parent coaching type folks, and we were talking about having a really good conversation. I want you to start out with things like this. What do you want to do that you normally don't have time for? What fun activities have you always wanted to learn? Or what's something you always wanted to learn? What's something you always wanted to try out? Start with that kind of conversation. So now you've got, what makes you, I'm sorry, hold on. I like to talk about what makes you feel good. So when you're doing this, like for example, when I play ukulele, I can feel it in me. I'm like, woo, this is really fun. And I start to get I can feel a lift inside me. You want your kiddos to find that lift. You want to teach them what makes you feel good, not what's cool or what is everybody else doing. What makes you happy? And you want to start that conversation like that. And then I personally have some must-dos before the can-dos, typically. If it's a typical day, we have things okay, so I personally like something called the Bridge Book. And I buy one every year for my kiddos, and it's 15 minutes of work 15, not even 30 minutes of work. And it's it's not the best because it's workbooks, but it's it's not on a screen and it's easy to do. And the Bridge Book is good because it does all of the curriculums. It's not just reading and writing, but it has a bunch of different things. It is a little laborious where you might have to explain some things to them, but that's something we like to do. We also take the time to do Type to Learn. So my kiddos, in order for them to get screen time, have to get certain things done, chores. I could do a whole workshop on chores. I have that nailed down. And then they have, if they want screen time, then they have to do Type to Learn in order to get their screen time. So 15 minutes of Type to Learn gets them 15 minutes of screen time, up to an hour. That's how we've kind of worked that out. I mean, we could do a whole thing on summer activities too. But I hope that helps at least start the ball rolling. Okay, let's see. I get that too, Amy. And what? Oh, I think I missed I think I can't see the question before. Let's see. Let me just go into quality work is a struggle here sometimes too, or it's done, but doesn't always seem like their best. Yeah. And you know what? I think the hardest part about this is the pass, no pass. kind of thing, because all the kids are going to pass. So getting quality work is really tricky. I think working hard on, either you want them really to be the quality control, like asking like on a scale of 1 to 10, how proud of this are you? That might help. But if you have to be the quality control, that's an option too. Like, I think as a teacher, you can have a ticket out kind of thing. So your ticket out, in other words, a ticket out the door or out to do something fun is quality work. And again, always point out all of the fun, all the good things first so that they want to come to you. If you can easily train them when they come to you that mom's going to tell me all the things I did wrong, or dad's going to point out my faults. Or you can train them like mom sees the good in me and then shows me what I need to work on. Think about which parent you would go to. And that's the kind of thing that you want to hopefully get across to your kiddos. Let me see, I have another one. When I ask my kids what they would like to learn about, neither of them wants to do anything. I've asked them to come up with some things they want to do or learn about. I know this is so hard. I actually had the same conversation with my daughter, and I ended up just trying to pass along a gazillion kind of ideas. I think part of it's the digital age. What do? They either play with their friends or they're on a screen. So I think it's really hard. And I think it's just a sign of the times. So my plan, and I did start this yesterday, is to create some, like even just a piece of paper like this and have like a brainstorming sheet. Okay, so these are your options of what you can do. And then you just start like have a family meeting, have a brainstorming session where you just chat out different ideas of what they might want to do, or try to get some sort of community going through with their friends about maybe something like my daughter, we started like a book club, and they meet once a week, and they don't even have to read the same books. They just talk about books. And then you could join, learn something fun on YouTube. So that's kind of a good go-to, is like, you can learn how to juggle on YouTube. You can learn how to do all these things. Now it's a screen, but it's not like you're not constantly playing a video game or something like that. And I know it's tough when the kids don't want to go outside either. Yeah, that one's definitely a tough one. You know what? Potentially might help is if you go out with them. So you make it a family game day and you go out and play kickball, or you go on family hikes, or you just try to get a bunch, like play can jam out in the yard, catch the football. Our generation came from like, okay, go out and play. And that's great, and that's awesome. But it's also good to have something to do together. If you can't get the kids to go out by themselves, I would try to go out there with them and find something they're interested in, and then hopefully through that they come out with some sort of love of being outside. And if you do have to go, I totally understand. I see some people have to go. Let me see. I do want to share some. Oh, and hikes. Yes, Carrie, hikes are awesome for sure. I love that. I wanted to share a problem-solving method, because I feel like the key to helping kids navigate life is to help them through problem-solving. So I just wanted to show you. This is adapted, I want to say, through a lot of different things, but I want to say it's primarily adapted through, oh gosh, what's his name? Green. His last name is Green. Okay, so when we do problem solving, the first thing you're going to do is define the problem. Now, what you often do, or I often do, is you think about the problem from your perspective. Wait, is everybody able to see my screen? Hold on, I just realized. Can you see my screen? I don't think I screen shared.
We can't see it, Judy.
Okay, thank you. I'm showing you stuff and you can't see it. I knew there would have to be some sort of snafu. Okay. So
You can see it now.
Good, thank you. Okay, so when we define the problem, we often think of it from our perspective. But if we want to get somewhere and we want to have our kids actually feel like they're going to have their problems be solved, you're going to start with their side of things. So I'm going to give you an example of something that is going to happen most likely for each and every one of us because we're in quarantine, and you know, depending upon how you feel about sleepovers, we're going to all be put in this situation. So the child says something like this: I want to have a sleepover with my friends. And you're like, COVID, you know, you start to palpitate, you start to freak out. You're like, oh my God. So try to hold the palpitations, and you're going to start out with a connect. So, man, you really miss your friends and want to spend time with them, because that's really what's happening with them. You really miss your friends and want to spend time with them. And at this time, I'm not very comfortable with having a sleepover during quarantine. I'm worried that kids, you know, somebody might get sick. That's where you want to start. That's two perspectives: your child's side, you connect, and then tell them your side. Why is it an issue? Okay, now you're going to take turns making suggestions, and this is the really tricky part, without judgment. Because what we want to do is kind of like negate things when they come out, and your child's going to want to negate what you have to say. But take turns. If your child can come up with some suggestions, hopefully that's helpful. So the first thing, your child, we could have a sleepover Friday and Saturday, and you're like, okay, and you write that down. It's not that you're agreeing with it, you're just writing it down. We could have a Zoom call, is your suggestion. Child says, we could have a sleepover if I'm really, really good on Sunday. Parent says, we could take a walk with your friends on opposite sides of the street. Child says, we could have a social distancing play date. Parent says, you can wear masks and we can go get ice cream together. It could go on and on and on. It could be very short. But this is just, we just want to hash out what are some solutions. And you're just trying to come up with some things that you would potentially be comfortable with. Now, the next thing you want to do is take turns crossing off suggestions you're not willing to do. And this means you and your child. So you go back to that list and you cross off, you know, I'm assuming you're going to cross off, you know, sleepovers every night. And your child's going to cross off a stinking Zoom call because they're sick of those. And then you kind of navigate to the point where you can feel like you come to something that you might be willing to do, and you circle that one. So narrow it down to one idea that you're ready to try. And you're going to make a plan to implement that solution. So that's when whatever you have narrowed it down, you write down the plan. And this is the hard part, you stick to it. And then if you are really good, you're going to reflect on it. You're going to say, after you implement the plan, you're going to say, how did that go? I wonder. So let's just say it was the social distancing play date. Okay, so how do you think that went after the play date? And the kiddo goes, yeah, it was great. And you're like, it looked like you had a lot of fun. I don't know if you stayed 6 feet apart that whole time. What do you think? And you just sort of reflect what went really well about that play date and what didn't. So then maybe your kiddo says, yeah, you know, Jimmy really kept forgetting to stay apart, and he really wanted to go inside and play video games. And that's when you could say, so what should we do different? And then maybe you either have a good talk with that kiddo, or maybe you decide that a different kiddo is a better one to bring over. So you just want to reflect. And that's something that I want to impart to you for everything. You reflect, then you're teaching your kiddos the non-judgmental way of evaluating what went well and what didn't go well. And that is the problem solving. And you can do that literally with everything. I had my Ross Green, thank you, Courtney. I couldn't think of his first name. I've done that. I had kiddos who in third grade and first grade or something like that, it was New Year's Eve, and we used the problem solving method. And they wanted to, of course, stay up past midnight. we wanted to have them go to bed at 9. And using the problem-solving method, we decided what they were going to do and what time they were going to go to bed. And I think they went to bed either 9:30 or 10 happily, because they had been heard, and we had come through with this solution. So problem solving. I even have a worksheet, which I couldn't figure out how to share. So if anybody would like a worksheet, because it just kind of guides you step by step, you can always email me. And I'm happy to send that off to you. My email is, actually I'll type it so that it's easier, but it's Judi. Let's see, Judi, hold on, that's a private comment. I don't know how to get to a non-private. I'll do it at the end, or maybe,
Hey, Judi, where it says to,
yeah.
click on that arrow and you should have a choice that says everyone.
Everyone, thank you. Lee, you're so good. Okay, Judi.Johnson at effective effort, it's very long, consulting.com. And it's Judi with an I. So I'm happy to help you, email that worksheet off to you if you're interested, if you want something like a tangible, a piece of paper to have. So we're just here at about 1 o'clock. And we have covered a bunch of things. If there are other topics that you are interested in, and, oh, did I not hit enter? If there are other topics that you're interested in and you'd like to maybe dive more into, I do private parent coaching, but we're having a new way of getting together. We call it the New Book Club. So you know how when your mom, like friends got together and you'd all read the same book and you chat about it and drink wine and all that kind of stuff. I do the same thing, but with books like The Whole Brain Child. And so we dive in 1 week at a time, or every other week, or even once a month, whatever floats your boat. We have fun kind of learning about this topic little by little, so that you're in this great supportive environment. Or maybe even have, like, you want your kids to do chores, but then you're going to hear from your kids like, I'm the only one who has to do these chores, and then you don't want to hear that. So if you get together with your friends and all of your kids' friends and you're all on the same page doing the same thing, imagine what your kids are going to feel like. They're going to be like, oh, everybody has to do chores this summer. It's COVID summer.
Love
so
it.
that's the kind of thing that I like to do, because I think it's powerful. I've always been a really big fan of trying to get everybody on the same board so that the kids feel good. But do we have any last minute kind of questions? I'm sure, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah. Any last minute questions before we leave? Okay, it sounds like most of them. I hope I got to most of your questions. There was a lot in the chat and I was trying to switch back and forth, so I hope I got to all of them. I know I gave you, okay. What if you're right-brained and your husband is left-brained? That's really
Yeah.
Goodbye, everybody who's saying goodbye. It's the same thing as your parent. Wait, if you're right-brained, so you're gonna love this. It's Kelly, right? Kelly answered the question. Ask the question. Okay, yeah. You're gonna love this, Kelly, because left-brainers, guess what book they like?
Oh, there you go.
Because this is neuroscience. So that's one of the reasons I really like this book, because it takes neuroscience and can you see how much I've read this book? It takes neuroscience and gives it a practical plan of execution. So now if you're right brain, you're probably going to be more of the understanding part and the empathy part. And he's going to need the rules and regulations. So I would highly recommend this. This book is also an Audible book. So not everybody is a reader. I listened to this book like 3 times before I was ready to teach it, because the first time I was like, wow, that was mind blowing, but I don't know how to do anything. So I read it again. And I was like, oh, okay, now I kind of got it. And I started to just do a little bit by little bit. because that was the only way I was able to implement it. Because there are some incredible strategies. Your kids are going to be the most well-adapted kids ever if you kind of go through socially, emotionally regulated and adapted, if you go through the whole brain. So it's really cool. So great question, Kelly.
Thanks. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. So this was a lot of information. I know I gave you a ton. I always try to pack in as much as I can. What I want to leave you with is maybe one thing that you're going to do. And if you want to put in the chat, you're welcome to. One thing that you're like, wow, I think this could be it. And just to refresh your memory, we talked about connecting and redirecting. We talked about using intrinsic motivation in order to help your kids plan, sound decision making. Talked about some tips to get you through summer. So you can either write it in the chat, or you can just kind of say it, or just say it to yourself, because I think we go to all these topics and all these things, but it's so much more valuable if you implement what you really want to get done. And so take something away from this. Oh, I love that. Importance of patience and tone of voice, visual planning. Excellent. Ooh. Breathe, connect with the right brain, and resist reacting with your logic immediately. That's one I still have to work on. That's awesome.
Well, this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Judi, for your time. And participants, we will send a copy of the presentation to everyone, so you have that to reference back. And, you know, the Parent Connection, our goal is to bring programming like this to the community. So if you have ideas, I mean, I think we talked about doing something in the fall when we kind of start to see what school's going to look like in the fall. But I mean, last week I said I took a yoga class. Today I feel like I went to the spa. So this was great. This was really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It was great. You guys were fantastic participants, and I think you guys, your kids are so lucky to have each and every one of you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.